welcome to the ChronCast, a division of the Chronicle and IMI. We hope you'll enjoy today's podcast episode, and if you do, please be sure to leave a like and share it around. Also, be sure to follow us in our social medias, which will be linked in the description box below.
Hey everyone, welcome to the ChronCast. I'm your host, Aditya Thiyag, and I'm joined once again by Lydia Lysko. Lydia, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. How was your weekend?
It was good. I just sat down, watched some of my favorite old movies.
Alright.
Though I say old, and it's only been like, oh my gosh, the first X-Men, I think, came out 20 years ago or something?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up X-Men, because, it wasn't this month, but, last month I was on an X-Men rewatching binge myself, and, I was surprised that not all the movies hold up super well, but, some of the best ones, they really hold up.
Yeah, no, I just love going back and just, remember what it's like to, watch it for the first time.
Yeah.
And just be like, I remember this scene, and then look at, some of the other ones, and I'm just like, that's in here.
Yeah, but the first X-Men movie, it's crazy to think that it came out pretty much 22 years ago, because it came out in 2000.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And that's to think about important landmarks. It was 12 years before the first Avengers movie, 8 years before the first Iron Man, and then 2 years before the original Spider-Man movie, which a lot of people credit as the shift to the superhero movies we see today.
Mm-hmm.
And even Batman Begins, which came out 5 years after X-Men. But I feel me personally, I'd credit it to X-Men, because before that we didn't really get a serious drama with superheroes.
Yeah, no. X-Men was Marvel's First big thing, and I feel a lot of people forget about that. People are always oh, Iron Man is Marvel's first superhero, and it's no, he's not.
Especially it's obviously, I understand why people credit Iron Man, because it started the MCU, and I understand why people credit Spider-Man, because that is what really started origin story movies.
Yeah.
That and Batman Begins. But with the original X-Men, right, it completely changed the tone. For context, 3 years before this movie was Batman and Robin, and that was super campy.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a character drama in the slightest, and you'd get just really sloppy B superhero movies all the time. So to have something like X-Men where it felt it was tackling something a little more serious, that was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, no, X-Men was the big collaborative, there's all these different people with superpowers, and they're all together in one space, where you said it's the Batman and Robin, and then 3 years it's it's just Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And we don't get a full, at least not that I can remember, we don't get a full whole team until 12 years later with the Avengers. So
and even that had it's so interesting to see a superhero movie, because back then they didn't really do origin. When you get the first movie in a series, it's so common obviously to make it an origin story, right?
Yeah.
Where it's talking about how they got their powers and how they came together as a team. And X-Men, I think it's unique. It feels unique now because of how many origin stories we get, but they kind of just drop us in the middle of the X-Men. They're already formed, Professor Xavier's school is already up and running.
Yeah.
And Logan joins Wolverine, and he's our fish out of water, but every other X-Men is already established in this universe.
Yeah, we don't learn Jean Grey's background all of a sudden. We don't learn Professor X's background. We just see them we join in, you said, Logan is joining in, and we're doing the same thing. It's already this established team, and we're watching it. Wow, whereas we saw the Avengers come together, each their different individual movies, we're just walking in on the X-Men.
Yeah.
And I feel that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You're seeing an already team, how they already work together, and everything they do and how they work together. But and that sets up origin stories for later.
Mm-hmm.
If they have all those people now, it sets up for tons of movies
Later on.
Let's say if Iron Man flopped, I don't think they would have continued that path. But obviously it didn't.
Yeah. Which is that's a whole nother thing, if Iron Man flopped. But focusing on X-Men, I think the best part, to me at least, is how effectively, over the course of a couple movies, they're able to endear us to these characters whose origins we don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I really like, obviously, Charles. I like Jean. I'm not, like, huge on all the other characters, but I like Beast as well.
Yes.
And I think, like, it's extremely effective how both the performances of the actors and a little bit of the writing, like, they're able to endear us to these characters without giving us their backstory. And obviously the one that we get attached to the most as the audience is Logan, right?
Obviously,
because
yes.
he's the fish out of water, and he's the one that, like, gets the most screen time easily.
Yeah, and Hugh Jackman does an amazing job making Logan, like, this, like, lovable, like, ruffian, because he's not, like, your typical superhero. He's no Captain America.
He's no, like, Peter Parker.
He's no Peter Parker. He's this old man who's just trying his best.
Yeah. And I think that the thing, it's interesting that you brought up, like, Steve Rogers and Peter Parker, because, like, they're, like, meant to be endearing, but someone like a Wolverine, like, if, like, written or played incorrectly, he just becomes really annoying.
Yeah, it's like, he doesn't do, like, he's just so irritating.
And
right?
he's really standoffish.
Yes.
And Jackman, like, conveys all of that with his performance, but he makes it, like, endearing.
He makes it enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. And I know we were talking about the first X-Men movie, and it's impossible to talk about that without talking about Magneto, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And Ian McKellen, the way he plays Magneto, it's just, like, it's so interesting to see him in this, because I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, right?
Okay.
And in that, he's Gandalf, so he's, like, supposed to be, like, a wise wizard, and he's on the side of good. So to go from that to just a straight-up maniacal villain, like, I love the dichotomy, because, like, on one hand, he's like, oh, I'm super wise, and then Magneto's just straight up, like, an evil villain.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think Magneto's, like, also wise in his own respect as well. So, like, well, he may not be, like, the good wise, and everyone, like, it's like, oh, I'm Gandalf, right?
Yeah.
I don't know nothing about Lord of the Rings. But, I think he's, like, because he's one of, like, the, like, oldest mutants, right? And he, like, has seen all of this stuff. And, like, I think his and Charles's relationship is, like, works really well. Because, like, they're, like, similar, but they just took different paths along the way.
Yeah. And I want to focus on the original trilogy for now, but I do want to bring that up, like, later on when we talk about, like, the prequel movies, right? But, like, or the reboot timeline, whatever it is. But, like, I really, like, I'm glad you brought up the relationship between Charles and Magneto, like, Eric, because, like, it's not only the way their characters are written where they're supposed to be, like, two sides of the same coin, like, the chemistry between Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart is just, like, so
I
amazing.
love their chess scenes because they're so fun. And,
right,
like,
in X2, yeah.
Yeah, when they first, and then when Charles, like, first comes in, like, the plastic prison, I'm like, that's so cool, because, like, they were, like, really close, and, I mean, obviously we don't, like, know that at the time, right?
Yeah.
But we see how, like, well, they just work off of each other, and you can see, like, Charles, like, tries to understand Eric, he, like, because he's his old friend, right? So he, like, wants to be close again, and they just have really good chemistry. I think, overall, most of the X-Men, like, actors were excellent choices. Like, in my mind, I can't see, like, anyone else playing some of these characters.
Especially considering, like, the time, like, when I think Charles Xavier, I don't even think of, like, what he, like, looks like in the comics. I just instantly think Patrick Stewart, because, like, his blend of, like, wise and, like, charming while still being, like, a leader for the X-Men, like, I really, like, no one brings that energy more than Patrick Stewart.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And I love that you brought up the chess scene from X2, because just it gives me a chance to talk about X2, which is just absolutely, because, like, here's the thing, right? A lot of the time, like, it's hard for movies to top their first ones, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's always like a curse. Like, when you drop one great movie, the sequels automatically are like, oh, they're not gonna be as good, right? But, like, with the first X-Men movie, like, it's a solid movie, right?
Yeah.
It is, like, it has its flaws. It wears them very open. The villains aren't, like, outside of Magneto, like, Toad and Sabretooth, they're not, like, developed. They're just kind of there. Like, the plot is extremely straightforward. It's hard to really sympathize with Magneto, but I feel like they rectify all of that with X2.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, just from the opening shot, like, the opening scene where Nightcrawler just breaks into the White House and takes down a bunch of goons, that's so captivating.
Yeah, they do a really good job of building up what they already had and making it better. I feel like they saw what they had in the first movie, with like some of the cringe lines, like what happens to a frog when it gets struck by lightning.
Same thing that happens to every
Yeah, like they have lines like that, and then they go to like Nightcrawler, who easily becomes like so lovable, and he's just so like such a vibe. Right? And they just build on what they already have, and they make it better, which I think is like usually really hard to do.
Yeah. And I really so there was the show that I watched growing up, and it's called Wolverine and the X-Men. And that show, like, my favorite on that was Nightcrawler. But the only reason I even got attached to him originally is because I saw him in the movie. So I thought it was really cool of them to, like, introduce, like, more mutants that felt like it didn't feel like they were adding mutants for the sake of adding mutants. It felt like they actually had a purpose in the story.
Yes.
Especially with, like, Iceman, Bobby. I'm sad, like, as the movies go on, Rogue gets less and less to do. And it makes sense because her power's kind of broken. But I feel like her acting really got better in this one.
Yes.
So I liked Rogue. Pyro's in this movie. They introduced him. So there's a lot of new additions. And obviously, like, Nightcrawler, that opening scene is instantly, like, it's a great way to introduce him. But it's also a great way to start off the movie because it kickstarts the plot of, like, mutants really can be a threat. Like, this, it makes sense for humans to be scared of mutants if they're doing things like this, right?
Yeah, no, I get that 100%. And I feel like that's, like, the whole purpose of X-Men, to, like, show that, like, the differences of each people and how sometimes they can be beneficial, but sometimes if you, like, take it the wrong way, they can be really harmful.
I think it's so interesting, too, because, like, X-Men, like, started addressing, like, the issue with superheroes, I feel like, way sooner than something like the MCU did, because they only really started tackling it during Civil War when the complaint was like, oh,
Sokovia Accord.
Yeah, like, you guys are being unright. But, like, the whole thing with mutants, so Stan Lee, I'm not sure if you know this, Stan Lee created the X-Men as an allegory for racism and minorities.
Yeah.
Right? So for, like, the mutants to be, like, similarly oppressed and have questions about their existence, it's so interesting. And I think important for films to be tackling that kind of subject matter.
Yeah, I feel like X-Men was just too soon.
Yeah.
I feel like many people, like, it went over their heads, or, like, they just didn't want to, like, talk about it, because, like, the more you think about it, the more, like harsh the truth is. Like, these people didn't choose to be mutants.
Yeah.
And, like, they're being oppressed for just because of who they are.
Yeah.
And that is similar to, like, America's history.
Yeah, and that's
and everything.
I feel like that's, like, a relatable, like, I feel like that's an issue that could be brought up anytime, but as, like, time goes on, it's, like, a message that needs to continue to be brought up over and over again.
Yeah.
So I think X2, like, even, like, disregarding the plot, like, it's like core messages are extremely empowering, but I want to move on to, like, the actual plot of the film, because this one is extremely interesting in the sense that it talks about, I thought, like, it introduced sort of Wolverine's backstory extremely, like, quickly and efficiently, since the villain in this film is William Stryker. And he talks about, like, developing, like, a cure. I think, is this the one where he, like, talks about developing a cure for mutant kind? Or he's like,
I think so. It's been a while since I've seen X2, but I remember, like, is this the scene where we, like, get, like, the flashbacks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's either that, or it's, like, either way, like, he's against mutants, and he wants to put a stop to mutant kind. So you get this, like, really tense scene where the mansion, like, Charles's mansion, right? Like, you get the scene where, like, the first movie established it as, like, a safe haven. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not only a place for, like, the X-Men to work out of and use as a base of operation, but it's also a place for like, these kids to study, these kids
to learn who they are, and grow.
It's a safe place for them, right?
Yeah.
And immediately this film, like, rips into that by having, like, Stryker send, like, a SWAT team essentially to break into the mansion. You get this tense scene where, like, they're trying to evacuate everyone. You get some good action, but I love, like, how like, even in the second movie they were like, let's challenge the audience, let's throw a really big wrench into.
Yeah,
like,
they threw some curveballs. They wanted to, like, like I said, how they grow. They wanted to like grow and like challenge what they already had.
They wanted to challenge the characters, and I felt like they split apart because normally you see in these big like superhero movies, they like split apart the characters because it's easier to focus on them one at a time. But this one, I felt like it split them apart believably because like Charles and Cyclops are both visiting Magneto. Jean Grey and Storm are going to find Nightcrawler, right? And then Wolverine and then Rogue, Pyro, and Iceman are all like on the run because Stryker just attacked their home. There are 3 pretty engaging plot lines because we want to know what happens. Like we want to know Nightcrawler's backstory.
Because each of them are like equally as important.
We want to learn more about Magneto because he was the big bad in the last film, right? And then obviously we want to see like whether like Bobby, like Pyro, Rogue, and Logan all make it out alive, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, so I want to focus on one plot line at a time. First, I thought, like the Nightcrawler storyline, it's not like the most like fleshed out or anything, but for me, like any Nightcrawler is like
any
appreciated.
Nightcrawler content is good Nightcrawler
content. Like that's always appreciated. I remember they had like, I think he's like from Germany or he's like from Europe and he came over here and like he had like brands on him, like he was branded, and I thought like that was a quick way to like endear us to him because like he's been tortured, he's like suffered,
because of who he was. Again, going back to like what we were talking about
because he has like blue skin in the film, right? So like he was tortured for who he was, and that is something we brought up earlier. And then with Eric, I think the coolest thing about this film, and it's something that I feel like the other films like they used too much, but this film did it just the right amount, is they make Eric a semi-good guy.
Yeah, he's like an anti-hero.
He's like the enemy of the enemy is like,
Yeah, because he's like, he wants what's the best for mutant kind, because obviously he's a mutant, right? And he's like, I don't like being oppressed. He's like, obviously. So like, he reluctantly is like, I guess I can help.
Yeah, because like the thing with the X-Men is they want to do what's best for all mutant kind, which in their eyes is just protect all people equally. And then in Eric's kind, it's like only protect mutants and like seek out humans who are trying to hurt mutants, right? So when Stryker shows up and he's like, I want to kill all mutants, Eric's like, okay, I hate that guy more than I hate the X-Men. So I guess I'll join the X-Men for now. So it's so cool. Like it was cool the first time, right? To see Magneto as a semi good guy, because like I feel like in the first movie, like he's very clearly like a maniacal dictator.
Yeah,
right?
no, because he's like, all mutants must be better than everybody else. And then this one, he's like, that guy's way worse than any other guy.
Yeah, and like I feel like that emphasis on, like I feel like in this film we're able to see Magneto's side a lot more because we're able to see a mutant suffering, like what would happen with Nightcrawler, and be like what extreme Stryker is willing to do just to erase mutants. Like he literally broke into the house of like with, all
like children in there, and he was like, I just hate you so much.
Yeah.
For no reason, all because they're different.
Yeah.
He's like, mutants are just bad.
And it's further exacerbated when you realize like he was, like I think it's implied. It's either implied or shown. I'm not completely sure. Again, it has been a little while since I've seen this one in particular, but like it's implied that like he experimented on like captured mutants, some of whom like could be children, right?
Or like look what he did to Logan.
Right.
I mean, even that, like Logan was a product of his experimentations.
Right. Yeah, and that I felt was like a really good way to give us some, because when we are introduced to Logan in the first X-Men movie, he's kind of a blank slate, right?
Yeah, because he doesn't remember
no
anything, and he already has his like metal claws and everything.
Yeah, and like in this film, they're like Stryker's like sort of like I created you, and we're able to learn a little bit more about Logan. But to me, it's like it's implied that like it works on two levels: one, to develop Logan's character and let us know more about him, and two, to further villainize Stryker because he's literally experimenting
on one of our favorite characters that we know. So like it connects us to like how bad he really is, because like if he can do like this to Logan, imagine like all these other poor like mutants that he's experimented on.
And I think like my one of my favorite scenes in the film is like when everything is said and done, it's like Professor Xavier and the X-Men are in the White House and they talk to the president and they're like, dude, we know like what Nightcrawler did was sort of wrong, but like trust us, mutants are here for good. And that's a really beautiful scene, and I'm kind of mad that they totally screwed it up with the last stand. Unfortunately, like we love praising the X-Men, right? Because like X-Men are awesome,
They're
right?
so great, but
like not all the movies are that good.
There's just some things we don't need to talk about,
and
like they can be so cringe, and sometimes I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, the Last Stand is just straight up a bad movie. Like, there's not even that much, like, it's just bad.
There's not a lot, there's really nothing more we can say. It's just not...
It's just bad.
It's just bad.
Like, there's literally, no, because there were, like, 6 different opening scenes.
And it's
then,
just confusing.
And then Jean Grey kills Cyclops, but it's off screen.
Yeah, it really makes no sense. Like...
and then Charles Xavier dies. It's
yeah.
I don't it's
we don't have to talk about that one.
That one is certainly
that one.
The last, cuz like here's the thing, right? Like there are good X-Men movies and there are bad X-Men. I feel like there's no real like mediocre.
Yeah, I feel like you either are like really good, like X2, right?
Or First Class, or Days of Future Past.
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started. But we'll get to those. But then you have like The Last Stand, where you're just kind of like, I don't really want to talk about you.
And then you have like Apocalypse. And like, yeah, and like the movie where that's so Deadpool's mouth shut. We're not gonna talk about that one. We're only gonna talk about the main X-Men movies for today. But like. Yeah, some of these are not good, and that's why we said like originally like not all of them hold up. But like I feel like the broad strokes genius of the X-Men should not be overlooked.
Yeah, I feel like the X-Men are just generally underappreciated, like overall, because they're not main MCU, even though they were literally before the MCU, and they still made movies while like the MCU was coming out.
And obviously they're not like, it's not like you're watching like Infinity War or No Way Home or Civil War or anything like that. But the next movie we are going to talk about, in my opinion, is better than like some of those. It's not better than Infinity War, but I really like First Class.
First Class is
really
good.
So good.
First Class is really, really good. Yeah.
No, like, so I thought, because a lot of the times, right, like when you get these like reboots, like soft reboots, they feel the need to like retcon like everything that came before it, right? And switch everything up. But for me, right, I don't see X-Men First Class as like a true prequel, because trying to understand X-Men continuity will hurt your brain almost as much as calculus.
It's just
like,
not worth it.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much, because, I mean, like, especially from, like, the comics.
Yeah.
Like, the comics are just so full of stuff that obviously it's not going to be, like, 100% perfect.
No, but on top of that, like, even talking about, like, the movie timelines, like, I love the scene in the first Deadpool movie where, like, Colossus is like, I'm going to take you to Professor X, and then Deadpool's like, McAvoy or Stewart, these timelines are so
yeah.
confusing. Because, like, yeah, they are.
Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, gosh, I love Deadpool. But, no, I think James McAvoy was a good choice for like a young Professor X. Yeah.
Honestly, so my favorite like film mutant, I'm gonna exclude Logan because like it's too easy to like pick.
It's too easy to say it's the best.
No, because like he just gets the most amount of like screen time.
Yeah.
Oh, also the Logan film is the best one. Yeah. No, I just mean like Wolverine as a character.
It's just obviously the best.
Because he just gets so much screen time. Like, I feel like it's unfair to compare him to everyone else, right?
Because he does get the most screen time, because he was the fan favorite.
Yeah, yeah. But, like, for me, outside of, like, him, my favorite character in these movies is James McAvoy's Xavier. Especially in First Class, because I think the opening, like, one of the opening scenes of First Class is so interesting because, like, we know Charles as like a wise character, like a sort of
wise old man.
Yeah, a sort of like like a force of good, like an angel, right?
Yeah.
And literally, one of his introduction into the movie is him like using his mind reading powers to flirt with people at a bar.
Yeah, like that is. I think it's so good to show like the young aspect. Like he wasn't always like this. He was actually kind of like.
Yeah, he wasn't a perfect angel.
He's not a perfect angel that we know and love.
But I feel like this version of Professor X, like, I could see him being like a younger version of the Charles that we know, despite not being like in the same, because like the time makes no sense, right? But like I feel like he's this spiritual like precursor to.
Yeah, I feel like you can see how like he would have grown into him, because like Patrick Stewart, like he still had some like qualities of being like, oh, like not like the perfect angel always. Like you could see he was a little mischievous back in the days. And then James McAvoy does like such a good job of being the little mischievous Charles Xavier.
And I love how like I love his relationship with Raven, Mystique. And like I'm glad like Rebecca Romijn doesn't really get that much to do in the original trilogy.
She doesn't. She never speaks.
Yeah.
I think she has like one line.
But I'm glad they made like Mystique like a fleshed out character in this and Days in Future Past.
Yes.
Because like you finally get to see like why she ends up joining Eric, right? Because like she starts out the film as sort of Charles's like adopted sister, right? And she's which like if you're looking at please don't look at the continuity because like
don't. It's not worth it.
It's not worth
it. Don't hurt your brain.
Yeah, but like she's sort of his adopted sister, right? They take care of each other, and like Raven's like continually, because her arc in this film is basically trying to be loved for who she is, because she has like she has the ability to transform into anyone, but she
doesn't know who she is.
Yeah, and she has like blue skin, right?
Yeah.
And so like
it's all these blue skinned people.
But she feels it's like it's Avatar all over.
Yeah.
But like she wants to be accepted, and Charles obviously loves her for who she is, but even then to him she's like wearing like she's Caucasian in front of him, right? And finally she like the turning point for her, like she gets to meet Beast, Hank Pym.
Wait, Hank Pym?
Or no, oh my god, that's Hank something.
Hank. You got me there for a second. I was like
That's embarrassing. I should get my
You should be fired.
I should be fired. I'm resigned. This is my final episode of the ChronCast. I resign. But like Hank.
No, and I feel like their relationship is like really good because like they're both these blue people.
Yeah, but like I think it's so cool for it's it's Raven finally seeing like someone who's like her, and even though like he isn't fully turned at this point, right? Mm-hmm. He just has like hands for feet basically, right? But like she sees that as like, oh my god, like you're different.
It's and like you're accepting who you are.
Yeah.
Right, and I do think it's kind of like similar how to like, I think Mystique is like a good like way we can like kind of see into Eric as well, because we can see like how easy it was for Eric to go against people, because like Mystique kind of had like a hard power for people to like get their heads around, because she could literally become them.
Yeah.
While like Charles, you couldn't see his power. He literally was just like, he's mind thing, right? So like Mystique was obviously a lot harder, just like it was for Eric, because he was so strong that people like were like, oh, we're really scared of you. And like Mystique, like you can become anyone. We're terrified of you.
Yeah.
When actually they really should be more terrified of Professor X.
Like someone like a Charles. Yeah.
Like if I would much rather like fight a Mystique than fight a Charles Xavier.
Yeah. And I want to get to Eric, but like at the same time I want to talk about how Mystique and Beast like originally like the audience feels like they know where it's going and it's just gonna be a typical romance thing, right? And then you have that genius, because when Mystique meets Beast, right? Hank is working on this cure to hide like the physical part of their powers, right? And Mystique, her arc in this film is sort of accepting who she is, right? Mm-hmm. So for her to show up and be like her to walk up to Hank and be like, we don't need to hide who we are, we're going to be beautiful. Immediately the audience is supposed to be like, oh my god, that's beautiful. Hank is going to accept her. No, Hank is like, no.
He's like, no, I'm not beautiful. He's like, have you seen me? He's like, I'm ugly.
And then even when he looks at Mystique, like shows her true self, and she's like, "Am I beautiful this way?" And then he's like, "I love you."
He's
right?
like,
and
"No."
and then when she transforms back, and he's like, "You're beautiful now," and that crushes her. But like the audience, we're shocked, right? Because we're not used to seeing something.
He just straight up is like, I don't like my blue self.
Yeah, and I think like that's difficult. Like you don't really get scenes that like it not only challenges the audience, but like it challenges the characters, like what they really believe in. It develops them, but it also is like, how do you make openly flawed but likable protagonists?
Yeah,
you know what
like,
I mean?
I still like Hank.
Yeah.
I mean, because like it's understandable, because like his whole life he's been like shunned because he has this stigma against himself.
Because he has
like
feet for hand or
because
hands for feet,
he's
right?
Literally
He's
like a
beast,
beast.
yeah.
Right? So we can understand where he's coming from, like with Mystique, because like he has his own self-confidence issues. He
Yeah.
has his own issues.
And then,
right? He's
like-
not ready to comfort Mystique while she's getting into hers.
And like on top of that, like even though his mutation is less noticeable because he starts out with just having the
Yeah.
feet hands, right?
The feet hands.
The hand, whatever they are, right? But then like after he takes the cure, he just goes like full on beast. Like that is, I mean, in a sense, it's like karma for like what he said.
Yeah.
But like on top of that, like that's the start of his new arc of just accepting him,
Yeah.
like, and I think Mystique played a role in that. And I think the person who contributed the most to Mystique's growth is one of my favorite characters, played by one of my favorite actors, Michael Fassbender, as Eric, aka Magneto.
Yeah.
And like, I love Charles. This is Charles and Eric's movie.
Oh yeah.
And like I love how like with Charles you can really feel like he's the leader of the X-Men, like he's organizing this, he's training. I love the cute little training montage that they do.
Those are so cute.
I love like the first time that they build Cerebro is absolutely amazing.
That's really awesome.
Because like they use Eric's like magnetic powers to like build like this contraption that allows like Charles to see pretty much every mutant, and they hunt down a bunch of mutants, and like there's a cute Wolverine cameo.
Best Wolverine cameo. That's literally why I love Slogan so much.
Yeah.
So like they're trying to track down all these mutants to like build their team, right?
And like Logan's like, nah, I'm not. And like
Yeah.
before even hearing them out, and that's so in character.
No, and I remember that the only way Hugh Jackman was gonna be in that movie is if Logan had like a quick cameo and he could tell them to like screw off.
Yeah.
And he did, and it was perfect. It
Yeah.
was so good. I saw that scene and I was like, ah!
Yeah, but like they really established Charles as sort of this leader for the X-Men.
Yeah, you can see him grow into like
A leadership role. Yeah. And then with Eric it's almost like the polar opposite, because like him, even from the opening scene, which is a great like the opening scene of the first X-Men movie is so powerful because it's genuinely like him being like stripped away from his parents
that's just
during the
hard.
Holocaust, right?
Like,
And they call back to that in this film, and it's equally powerful then.
exactly.
And we're able, like, immediately from that scene, we're like, you know, I understand why he'd want to go on, like, a revenge pursuit. Because, like, we see his, like, mother, like, get killed in front of him because he's not able to, like, there's this really tense scene where the character's like, if you don't use your powers, I'm going to kill your mom. And in most movies, we know, like, after the countdown, like, he's going to do it at, like, 3, 2, and he's going to do it at 1, right? And his mom's going to be okay. But no, his mother gets killed.
Yeah.
Eric's mother. And, like, this boy, Eric, literally, like, ransacks, like, the room next to him.
Yeah, he just absolutely destroys it because, like, it's his mom,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, we understand, like, yeah, I get that. Like, I can see how you become a
Yeah.
villain.
But,
it's understandable.
like, even, like, in this, like, film, like, before Eric and Charles meet up, we see Eric going on this little quest to essentially, like, track down the people involved with his mother's murder, right? And when Charles finds Eric, it's because, like Eric is trying to hunt down, like, this villain. I forgot exactly what his role in the story is, but I remember he was involved in, like, the death of Eric's mother in some way, shape, or form. And Charles like rescues Eric after like he gets like beat basically by this dude, right? And then you see them like starting to form a relationship. You see their conflicting ideologies, because whereas Charles is more like, I can like slowly, like through negotiation.
Yeah, it's like I can build like mutants up like over time, and it's just gonna take time. Eric's like, no.
Yeah,
I want it now.
Eric's like super apathetic, and it makes sense considering like his trauma, right?
Yeah, because Charles never had to like go through that. Charles doesn't understand what it's like to have your mother killed in front of you.
And on top of that, right, like Charles's mutation is hidden. It's a lot.
No one will know.
Yeah, like if like he could, like when you have people who do like street magic or something where like they guess what card you have, right? Like that's something that Charles could pull off believably and be like, oh, it's just like simple, like it's a traveler's trick. That's how I know so much about you, right? And the mind reading thing, it's extremely like subtle. Like he could use it to steal information without people noticing. It's kind of hard to not notice someone move metal around.
Yeah, right? Literally like, I forget what movie it is, but like the JFK bullet, it's like, did you curve the bullet? Because he's like the only person that can control metal.
Yeah.
Like, because there are many different types of like the psychics or the mind people, right? Eric's literally like the only one who can control metal. So like, oh, that's why he literally had to be like in the plastic prison in X-Men. And then because his power is just kind of overpowered, and I kind of love it.
Yeah. And I think out of all the films, like this film does a really good job like leading up to the climax. Like when like there's this really tense scene, because the film is set during the Cold War, I believe, right? And there's this tense scene where they think like nukes are going to be fired at like America, right? And so you have like I think the Russian Navy, the American Navy, and then like the X-Men like trying to go in and prevent this, right? Because the villain essentially, he wants to kickstart the Cold War, right, and make it actual nuclear war. Yeah. So like this climax, like sort of everyone's involved in here, right? Like everyone gets their own, like Beast is flying the plane, like everyone gets their moment in the spotlight, right? But when Eric finally tracks down like the main antagonist who was responsible, who wants to kickstart this nuclear war, who wants to kickstart like or who killed Eric's mom, right? Yeah. Like normally, like Eric's about to like kill the villain, right? And Charles reaches out and he's like, "No, you shouldn't do that, Eric. Like killing is wrong. We won't, like, you're setting mutants back." And then Eric's like, "I don't really care." Yeah. No, because like in most superhero films, like that moment is supposed to stop the person.
Yeah, that's like. Have you ever heard of like a tragic hero? Yeah. That's like Eric's tragic hero moment. That's where he's like, I don't care. He's like, this needs to happen. Yeah. It's like, this is the only way we're gonna be like free if we kill him. Yeah. So he doesn't listen. He's like, I don't really care. He's like, I'm gonna kill him anyways. Yeah. And like, like in a movie, like when I think of even the first Spider-Man movie, right? Like Peter isn't the one who kills Norman, right? It's Norman who ends up like killing himself, right? But like Peter, like that moment was extremely cathartic for him because like he's like, this is when he establishes like he's a good guy. Like he's a good hero. And even in the third Spider-Man film, like he goes from like completely blasting Sandman to being like, I forgive you. Yeah. You know, he has that change of heart at the end. But like Magneto doesn't get that. No, and I think it works because like this is truly Magneto's origin story. This is why we see him become the villain he is, right? In X-Men, yeah. And like the real like crazy scene isn't even when he kills him, it's what happens after, because like both navies sort of fire on the island that like all the X-Men are on, where the villain is on, right? And Magneto sort of he stops all the missiles because overpowered, right? Yeah, OP. But like he turns them back around, and like Charles is like, don't do it, man, don't do it. And like Magneto's like, he like sends him back anyway, right? And I think the crazy scene about that isn't even the fact that like Magneto would do something like that. It's the fact that up until this movie, Charles has been walking fine. Yeah. Right? But when someone tries to shoot Magneto, one of the X-Men tries to shoot Magneto,
Magneto deflects the bullet and it goes into Charles's spine.
Yeah, that's when we really just realized, like, this is, like, the perfect, like, the two sides of the same coin moment. Like,
they were involved in, like, I just thought it was great, because, like, for me, I didn't know that going in, right? And when I watched it, I was like, oh my god.
It was
like,
his fault.
It was his fault that it happened. And you can see, like, Magneto's remorseful. It's not like he was, like, an evil mustache twirling.
They were friends.
Yeah.
Like, they were close. They did all of this stuff together to try to save, like, mutants and try to, like, build mutants the nice, like, reputation.
Yeah.
But then, like, Eric, like, he thinks this is the only way, and he doesn't, like, listen to Charles, and it bites him, because he, like, this mutant's trying to, like, hurt him, and, like, he said he comes the bullet right into, that moment was so sad.
Yeah, but, like, I think this is also, like, this is when, it's sad that, like, right as the X-Men begin to form, like, they're already breaking apart, because this is when Mystique, like, after her conversation with Beast, and after Eric tells her that, like, you're beautiful just the way you are.
Yeah,
like,
what she wanted to hear from
and
Beast.
that's what she wanted to hear. Like, she joins him, right? And Eric...
He's the one that validated her.
Yeah, even Charles didn't do it.
Yeah.
And, like, Eric's like, all right, like, I'm leaving you guys because I don't agree with the way you're handling things. We are going to truly make the world safer for mutants. And then you get, like, Charles in the wheelchair, and you get him in the mansion, and it's like, it's so good.
It's such a good movie. Because it just, like, again, it sets up more movies, and it also supports what we learned in the first X-Men movie. How, like, you can see how, like, they had, like, this old friendship, this old, like, rekindled friendship. Yeah. And then it's just beautiful.
And after First Class is... I go back and forth on whether the next movie is better than First Class. I think First Class is better right now, but Days of Future Past is, like, really
such
good.
A good movie.
It's, like, really good.
I love this movie. Oh my god.
Yeah. And, like, first of all, X-Men Quicksilver is way better than MCU Quicksilver.
Oh my god, it's not even like a competition. And that's what I hated in WandaVision when they teased us.
Yeah.
With Ralph Boner. Are you serious?
Yeah,
That made me physically violent.
Yeah.
I was infuriated because he's just so funny. He's literally just like, he's like this teenager, right? Or like
he's
this
charismatic.
He's fun to the audience. He's like, he's relatable because, I mean, what would you do if you got, like, super speed, right?
Like, steal a bunch of stuff.
Steal a bunch of stuff because you wouldn't get caught.
Play ping pong with yourself because no one else is going to be able to play it as fast as you.
Right?
Like,
because he's just like, I'm like, if I had super speed, that's exactly what I would do with it.
And then you have, like, the time in a bottle scene. Like, because Eric is in prison, right?
Yes.
And,
we need to break him out.
I mean, the whole premise of this movie is basically that, like, the Sentinels, which are these giant evil creatures that essentially adapt to like, fighting mutants, right? And are able to kill, like, mutants, right? Is that, like, the world is essentially in a post-apocalyptic state, and pretty much all mutants are dead because of these Sentinels.
Yeah, so we need to go back in time before they were created and, like, stop them from being created.
And stop the person who created them, right?
Yeah.
So, like, the way, like, they send Logan back. So in the comics, actually, they send my favorite comic book X-Men character, who is Shadowcat, right? I love Shadowcat, but, like, Kitty Pryde. But, like, in this one, they send Logan back. And it makes sense because, like, Logan's already, like, the fan favorite.
Yeah, so it makes sense for them, instead of introducing a new mutant, use somebody who, like, we know it's going to be some chaotic stuff is going to happen.
Yeah. And, like, we get, like... First of all, I love the Sentinels' design in the movie, because in the comics, they're, like, these big, obnoxious, like, giant creature, like, robots.
In the movie, they're really scary.
Yeah.
I remember, like, just seeing, like, the first scene where they would, like, open up and they're like, wow, we have this
adaptable
thing, and it's so scary, and I'm like, ah.
I also think it's really cool, like, because the reason they were able to create these Sentinels to adapt to the mutants' powers is because they used, like, Mystique's stuff.
They used Mystique's DNA.
Right? So, to reflect that, the way that the Sentinels transform is the reverse of how Mystique transforms into, like, another person. And I was like, that's a really cool design choice. I was like, that's cool. So, anyway, they send Logan back in time, and it's basically Logan's job to bring Charles and to talk to Charles, because, like, at this point, Like, Logan doesn't know what to do. He's like, okay, let me go to Charles. And it's so interesting that after films where Charles was the leader and Charles mentors Logan this entire time, Logan essentially needs to bring, like, a reclusive, like, totally drunk...
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to do the X-Men anymore.
And,
he's just like, he's so funny.
And he even suppresses his psychic powers through... Okay, this is plot convenience, and this is, like, this makes no sense, because it's like a magic pill that lets him walk, but he can't, like, use his mutant powers.
Yeah, it makes no sense, because, like, he got injured from the bullet, not from, like, using his...
But, like, magic. Like, no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But, for the sake of plot, right?
He basically plot. Anyways.
No, but, like, what I love about this story is how... Like, again, they're continuing to challenge the characters by, instead of putting them in the conventional, like, Charles is the teacher and Logan's the student. Now, Logan's the one...
You have to see Logan be like, dude, we need you. Like, this is where Logan, like, steps up and is like, I'm being honest here. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And he's like, I need you to be, like, Charles. I need you to be the Professor X because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's pretty powerful.
And then Logan and Charles go and they meet Quicksilver, right?
Literally the best scene in that whole movie is when it's the slow-mo and Quicksilver's running.
Because I
love this movie so much.
Because they need to break Eric out of
the Pentagon.
The Pentagon, right?
He's literally the Pentagon.
So, and like, obviously Quicksilver's in because, like, dude, if I'm already stealing from other stuff, I want to see the Pentagon.
He's like, I want to see if I can break into the Pentagon. He's like, let's go.
And I love how, like, there's, like, a realistic side effect to some of his... Because when he walks up to Eric, right, he's like, I'm holding the back of your neck so you don't get whiplash, right? Because, like, otherwise your neck might, like, literally break from the speed that he's moving at, right? So, like, as they're, like, breaking out, right, like, Eric's, like... They're confronted by a bunch of guards, and then Eric is about to, like, kill them all, and then the guards shoot the gun, and then time slows down, and then Quicksilver just shows up.
Yeah, that's just so perfect. I just love him so much, because he's just, like, in that whole movie, he's just literally, like, an icon. I'm just like, I just want to be him, because he's just so chill about it. He's like, hey. He's like, what's up? And
we only get, I'm glad that, like, as much as I would have wanted more Quicksilver, I'm glad they didn't overstay his welcome.
Oh, no, yeah, for sure. I think he was there exactly for, like, what he needed to do, right? And he was just, like, perfectly used. It just makes me so happy.
Yeah. And then, Days of Future Past, you might be a little more, like, well-versed in this movie than me. I do like it, but I like, First Class.
Yeah.
I like First Class more. That's the one I'm more familiar with. But in this movie... Like, the conflict is that, like, Mystique essentially wants to kill this dude named Trask, who is credited for inventing, I think, the Sentinels, right?
Yes.
And, like, people, like, are worried that... So Mystique's solution is essentially, like, if we kill him,
it's
right?
Not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen. But, like, with... Like, mutants won't be in danger, right? But the point of the film that I think is really interesting is that, like, the whole reason that Trask shouldn't be inventing the Sentinels is if he doesn't fear mutant kind.
Yeah.
And that's, like, Charles' approach.
Yes.
And so what, like, they decided to do is, like, they sort of endear themselves to Trask, and I thought that was the right climax for this movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like... I mean, obviously there was a big action scene, right? But it wasn't like a bunch of unnecessary, like, big CGI explosion blooping.
No, it was them trying to be like, we're not scary. We're just people like you. And then Mystique comes in and is like, she changes and he's like, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And then, like, yeah. No, I know exactly what you're saying.
And I love how, like, at the end, like, when all is said and done, when they bring Logan back, they're able to reconcile, like, the timelines, because, like, when Logan comes back, like, Jean is alive, like, Cyclops is alive, right? Like, even though, like, because he's lived, because the continuity in these movies makes no sense, so they were like, screw it, we're gonna merge all the timelines together and make it simple, right? And I loved how that, to me, should have been, like, the end of the X-Men saga, because it just
I mean, yeah, it would have been nice, but I mean, I'm not if it's good X-Men content, I'm not gonna say no.
Yeah, but the movies that came after this were like X-Men Apocalypse, and that movie's also really bad. And then, so
We don't talk about Apocalypse.
I know enough about I know nothing about New Mutants, right?
Oh, same.
But I know a fair bit of Dark Phoenix, and I don't know how they screwed up the Phoenix storyline twice.
Okay, like, what's the point? Like, I feel like we don't... Like, I love Jean, right?
And the Phoenix saga is like the like quintessential like X-Men saga. But how do you mess it up twice?
How do you do it? Yeah, it's not that hard.
Because like this is a storyline so iconic that like the 90s animated series did it correctly.
Yeah.
And no shade to the 90s animated series. That show was awesome. But like this is something they were able to do on the silver screen.
Yeah, how could... Like, when you take it to the big screen... What could have gone wrong? There's like they could have done it very like, oh, this is what happened, and then they were like, let's make it bad.
Yeah, and even so you know how in Apocalypse like there's this scene where Jean very clearly summons like a flaming bird to stop Apocalypse.
Yeah.
So in Dark Phoenix, they retconned that by saying that the only way she gets the Phoenix is after that she goes into space and comes into contact with the Phoenix. So that force that she was using in Apocalypse was not the Phoenix.
Again, plot lines.
It doesn't because
makes no sense.
No, and like, I mean, the only reason that Apocalypse was somewhat digestible is we got an even better Quicksilver scene. Yeah. Right, where it's set to like sweet dreams and he's clearing out everyone in the mansion. But we don't even get that in Dark Phoenix. It's just
no. That is, like, I'm going to use this to lead into something else. I feel like that's why the X-Men movies don't get the love they should. Because we have such terrible movies like Apocalypse that just
Last Stand, yeah.
We don't have to talk about that. But, like, we have just these such bad movies that everyone's like, oh, X-Men is so cringe. Or, like, they just forget about them because, like, these movies absolutely just bombed in theaters because they were...
They weren't the MCU.
They weren't the MCU, right? So everyone just, like, looks over the X-Men. Even though they're, like, exactly everything we've talked about here today. First Class, Days of Future Past, X2. Even the original one.
Yeah, and we haven't talked... I know we didn't talk about, like, spin-offs, but, like, Deadpool 2, Logan, like, they're so fantastic.
And then I know you don't like it, but I have some, like... Nostalgia for Wolverine Origins.
Girl.
I really like Logan, so...
Nah, but, like, even, like, excluding all of those, like, the core X-Men movies, like...
are very solid.
They're solid.
Very
like,
good
when they're
movies.
good, they're really good. Like, something like X2 and First Class and Days of Future, like, those are really great movies.
Yeah, and I think even, like, Marvel themselves kind of just, like, wants to, like, not talk about X-Men. Because even, I know, like, the actors, like, Jennifer Lawrence was like, oh, I was a superhero.
Yeah.
And she's like, I was an X-Men. And everyone's like, oh. And then I know James McAvoy's always like, oh, when I was doing one of the X-Men, there was just so many, right? Like, I feel like people just want to forget about it, even though, like, there's some really good stuff and, like, some very iconic characters. Like, almost everyone know who Wolverine is, but they don't, like, know where he's from.
And they don't really appreciate, like, how iconic and important the X-Men have been to, like, the culture. Because, like, obviously they're not the MCU, right?
No.
And they're not the Spider-Man trilogy, but they are iconic in their own right. Yeah. And they definitely inspired, like, aspects of the MCU.
They definitely kicked off, like, all of, like...
the superhero team
building because they were this superhero team.
Yeah.
Right? There are all these, like, different people who are just... They're using their commonality, that the fact that they're mutants, to, like, try to be better and try to make the world better. And I feel like we can see that in, like... Avengers, there's all these like superhero or really cool people that are coming together to try to save the world. And the way they balance the
characters is akin to the way they do it in X-Men too.
Yeah, and I just feel like they're just underappreciated. And go watch X-Men.
Yeah, no, I really hope, like, cause like even after like I was fans of X-Men before, right? But especially after talking, for this long, like, it's really gotten me to appreciate like what they did for the culture. And, like, the films in general, so
you could see how, like, excited I got when we talked about certain aspects and, like, how we connected over, like, certain things. I think it's just, like, it's just different. It's not the same old, like, good guys are very good guys, and that's so clear. Like, everyone is kind of, like, not the perfect hero.
They're in this morally gray limbo zone. Yeah.
Yeah, because they have to do things.
Yeah, and like
not always the best. Sorry.
No, you're good. I just I really hope that after almost like an hour of talking about X-Men, I know I've gotten to appreciate it more.
Same, me too.
And we hope like you guys, like the audience, like we really hope you got to appreciate the X-Men films a little more. Please watch, like, because these movies, like,
they're just something different. Like, if you're just like, I just want to try something new, watch the X-Men movies, because like they still have like superhero elements, just some great fight scenes. They have such amazing characters like we've talked here about today, and you can just like find just something new that you may enjoy. It turns out you may like fall in love with like Wolverine or something.
like
right.
Point is, if you're burnt out on like what the this is not us disrespecting the MCU, because we both are really big fans.
We both love the MCU.
Yeah, but like if you're burnt out, like we completely understand. And like if you're burnt out and you want to still explore more superhero content, this is definitely one of the best places to start.
Yes.
And that is all the time we have for you guys today.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love coming on.
Yeah, no, what's it called? Even after like 4 episodes, I'm really glad that I have like someone stable to do it with.
Yes,
like,
of course,
yeah,
anytime.
Yeah. And we really hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the ChronCast. This is your host, Aditya Thiyag, signing off.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the ChronCast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to be notified when our next episode goes live, please be sure to follow us on all of our social medias, as well as hitting the subscribe button. In addition, if you want to check out our other podcast, The Interview by Alex Daracel, a link will be provided in the description box below. We hope you'll choose to join us again on the next episode.